Hey everybody, and welcome back to the VantagePoint Church Quarantine After Party. As you may know, we're going through a series at VantagePoint called How to Survive a Quarantine and Not Kill Each Other. And this is just a space for us to dive deeper and to discuss some of the topics that we're learning about on Sunday. My name is Dale Chamberlain, and I'm here with Valerie O'Brien and Jill Marquez.
Hi.
Hey.
And this is our last week of the quarantine series at VantagePoint Church, which is good because that means also that we're coming near the end of quarantine itself. So it lines up well. And we are beginning to see light at the end of the tunnel, and the world is beginning to open back up a little bit. And so COVID-19 restrictions are finally being lifted in some significant ways. So Val, what's one thing that you've done in the past week or so that it was the first time you did it for a while?
We took our family to Irvine Regional. They opened last for Memorial Day weekend. And so that was super awesome. And honestly, we were still like apprehensive, like, are they going to kick us out? Like, what is it going to look like? Do we have to look active the whole time? And so it was just so nice to like put a lawn chair out and sit and just let the kids run around and play. So that was for our family a really refreshing day. So yeah.
Oh,
So
how
great.
fun. Was the weather good that day?
It was beautiful. Yeah. And it's I've never been there before, but lots of shade and lots of trees. And so it was just perfect. It was exactly what I wanted one of our first outings to be, for sure.
Well, for me, if I'm next, I have to say that last week you asked, like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, I want to go to all the restaurants. We did. Last night we went to 2 restaurants.
What?
So my husband and I had our last day we both work at Dunbar High School, and we had the seniors had a parade, so we got to go and be a part of that. Like the seniors drove by in cars and did like a little graduation. And so we already had my mom watching the kids, so we were like, let's go out to dinner. So we made a plan, and we went to Houston's in Irvine, Orange County, very important right now. And
Yeah.
it was amazing. Like I think I giggled. I probably choked up like 3 times. Like they're like, "Do you want to see a menu?" And we're like, "Yes, we do." And oh, it felt so good. And so we had a nice meal. I made sure to stay on my Weight Watcher points. It was fantastic. And then we got there early because we had come from graduation. And so then on the way home, again, we were in Irvine. We were just kind of like, we could go somewhere else. Like, where else is open? So we went to Yard House in Chino for dessert. So
Nice.
we've been had like the same exact experience of like, are you open? Like, we can come in. Yay! And so we
That's
had 2
fantastic.
meals. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was what we did for the first time.
There's that moment of anticipation as you roll up to, like, are they really going to be open? Like, can it be true? I had that same experience with Tamara, my wife, and my son Silas. We went to Islands here in Corona, and as we're rolling up, I'm like feeling nervous, almost like,
Right.
are you really going to be
Yeah.
open? And then as we were eating, it's funny because it made me realize how long we've been in quarantine, because when we would go out to eat with Silas before, he's kind of like just a blob that's there, and we just hold him and he's fine. But he's so much more active now because he's crawling and he's kind of more aware of the world. So we were like, oh wow, this is like more challenging than we remembered, like holding this like mangy baby that's like trying to crawl all over the table. But he loved it. Like he was like looking around trying to catch the eye line of everybody else in the restaurant so that they could give him attention. He was doing he was like clearing his throat to get the attention of people across at the other booth.
So
He was literally going until they turned around and smiled at him, and we're like, this guy, clearly he has not been socialized.
Oh,
Right.
how funny.
He's like,
But
people. How cute.
yeah, he's like, I haven't been aware of ever seeing people in my entire life. But it's been so great just to spend more time with some friends, and just to have some more human interaction. So I'm really just happy with the fact that we're getting a little bit more freedom, and we're still feeling cautious, but we're moving forward. And as we're transitioning into this kind of new phase, we're really focused on looking forward to kind of what's to come in the coming weeks and months. But now it's also a good time to kind of look back and reflect. And in the past few months, we've all experienced a whole lot of togetherness. And that certainly has brought like some wonderful memories and some joyful moments and really some beautiful things. But also on the other hand, for us and for many others, it's also brought moments of tension. It's brought hurt feelings. It's brought strain on relationships, and also a whole lot of need for forgiveness. And so that's what Pastor Mark talked about in his message this week. And he shared this quote that I love from Satchel Paige. And Satchel Paige, he was a famous baseball player. He was a pitcher who played when baseball, it was still a segregated sport. And so he played most of his career in what was called the Negro Leagues. But towards the end of his career, baseball integrated. And so he spent the last years of his career in the MLB in an integrated league. And he was actually the first Negro League veteran to be inducted into the MLB Hall of Fame. And so he was just this phenomenal athlete and a true icon, really on the level of Jackie Robinson. And but against the backdrop of experiencing segregation and racial injustice and a lot of hatred just throughout the course of his life, he's been quoted as having said this: "Love like you've never been hurt." And that was just kind of part of the key of his success. He says, "Love like you've never been hurt." So, Jill, what do you think he meant by that? And what kind of what does that kind of love look like in our relationships?
Oh my gosh, such a good question. I was trying to think like what analogy would I use for that? Love like you've never been hurt. And I actually thought of the dentist, as messed up as that is. That like I'm a grown up, I go to the dentist and have had my share of dental work. But there is this level of which you have to, I'm trusting my dentist, someone I see twice a year, hopefully no more. But I know that it's going to be, if the dentist is not painful, I'm not trying to say it's bad, but you have to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to let someone else help you, guide you along in your decisions in different areas. And so I really feel like that vulnerability is what makes it work. Because if you've been a little kid, if you have little kids or seen little kids, they won't open their mouth. Like, that's not loving like you've never been hurt. They're like, I only remember the pain. Mm-hmm. And what gets me about the dentist, being 41, having had a lot of work done on my teeth, that it doesn't hurt. Like, at this point in my life, the fear of what's going to happen is far worse than the pain that's happening. I mean, and I'm going way back. When I was a kid, you did get the numbing shot, but at this point we have pre-numbing before the numbing shot. Like like they have a topical, and then like you can't even feel the shot when they do it right. And every so often you do feel the shot. But to me, that's what I was just envisioning, is how much better it goes when you have a kid go to the dentist, they open their mouth, they accept what you're going to do and help them. So I don't know if that's a weak analogy, but that's what I was thinking of. No, you have to just go for it. You have to open your mouth and let the person do, the dentist, the educated person, help you. And then what's the second part of that question? I'm long-winded.
Yeah, today. that kind of love that he's talking about, the love that loves like it's never been hurt. Like, what does that kind of love look like in our relationships?
My gosh. So I think to me, it's that trust and that vulnerability that you have with someone. And again, I think that the analogy can go further here. Like I said, sometimes I have felt that shot that the dentists give you. I know they're not trying to hurt me. I know they're doing everything to do their best, but maybe my nerve is not in the spot they expected. Maybe it's my fault. And so when my husband, when my kids, when a friend steps on a nerve that they don't even know is a button for me or is a trigger for me, I have to give them the benefit of the doubt. I can't just say like, oh, you should have known that, you should have expected it. Like, no, of course not. I have to explain how things go, or why I would be feeling a particular way.
Something that I think even just this week, you gotta love like you've never been hurt. I feel like hurt, when he uses that in the sentence, like that triggers a lot of things, I think, for all of us. Like, we've all been hurt, and that could be relationships. Like I went back to like the junior high Val, and like the one that would get bullied by a specific person in choir, and it's like that was hurtful, and that could have prevented, if I just thought everyone was like that person in my life, prevented me from really great relationships that I now have. And then I went to like 16-year-old Val, who had her first boyfriend and her first real heartbreak, and it seems silly now that I'm married and everything else, but at that time it felt so real and so monumental. But to not have tried to love again because I was so hurt that one time, I think it's like so simple that he puts, you gotta love like you've never been hurt. but it's so powerful. Like that's a really powerful message. I was thinking about just the I don't want to say controversy, but this anti-racism that is, you know, we need to be aware of, and we need to be fighting for, you know, like justice, and not having these things go unseen anymore. And I heard a really great conversation with one of our leaders, with Jay Stovall, and it was just such a great, like, that was, you gotta love like you've never been hurt. Like that is something that a lot of people have to do every single day, and that's something that they have to do in every encounter that they have. And so it's just been something I was really grateful for the message on Sunday, and I think it's really timely with just so much happening in our environment and happening with leaving quarantine, and just so much that we can be taking away from that.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm glad you put that in there, because that is on everybody's mind right now.
Yeah. And it's so easy to become cynical and just so discouraged to the point of apathy. But maintaining that level of hope that there can be a better tomorrow, that there is this love that that can conquer the evils that we're experiencing.
Yeah.
It's just so important, because I mean, if you've been around for any length of time, you can see just the patterns, and you can see this globally. You know, if we're kind of talking on a broader scale, if we're talking about racial injustice, where we see patterns of this that just seem to continue, and it's so easy to get cynical. And I think down to our relationship level, we can see this, and we can kind of get cynical, because especially with the people that we're around, you know, we're all broken people, and you know, each of us is kind of broken in a particular way. And so you tend to display that brokenness in kind of a predictable fashion. You tend to, the sins that you have are the ones that kind of keep coming up. And so I think for the people that are close to us, we can get a little bit cynical and resentful, because you're almost like, oh, I could have predicted like that you were going to do this, you know, at this time, or like, oh, here we go again. And we just have that sense within us because of that frustration. But if we're having this mindset of love like you've never been hurt, like love like this is your first opportunity to show this kind of love.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of love that we want to show. But because we get discouraged or cynical, and we're keeping a record of wrongs, like it says that love doesn't do in 1 Corinthians 13, we get caught into this cycle where we're looking at those wrongs rather than taking the opportunity to love as though this is our first opportunity to do that.
I loved when Mark mentioned, sorry,
Oh,
just the examples of like David and, you know, Paul and Jesus, obviously the ultimate example, but it gets me emotional when I think about the Last Supper, and Jesus knowingly knows what's going to come, and he's loving them like he's not going to get hurt. And that's just like amazing to me, that he's washing their feet. Like he is loving them more than we would love my kids. I don't know that I wash my kids' feet when they're really dirty, you know, hose them off. But he's just loving them so tenderly and so compassionately when he knows he's going to be hurt. And we are, as a people, are trying to get over past hurts, and he's knowing it's going to happen. And so just such a great example that Mark shared with us, and just a reminder of what Jesus, the standard that he has set, and that he calls us to do.
It's so easy with the scripture you're referencing, Dale. Like, I think to your point, you were saying that we feel like we keep record of wrongs doing it. Like that scripture isn't talking to them in that moment. It's talking to me. So by me only remembering all the things that they haven't done to fulfill what love is, they're like, it's not about them. It's only about me. And I'm the only one that I can control. I'm the only one that I can have an impact on by my own actions, that I can do something. And so I feel like I liked how Mark had put all that together, that it's what am I doing for others? It's not what are they doing for me?
Yeah. And it can be so hard to continue to do that when we allow ourselves to have that sit in that hurt and let that hurt turn into kind of this cynical kind of view of others in our lives. Have you guys kind of felt that tension in quarantine where you can start to see patterns and, you know, that nerve gets stepped on again and again?
Yeah, no, I noticed with obviously marriage, it's like the best when you were saying about cycles, like there you could go back to my journals of a newlywed that, you know, would match some of the journal entries of like now, because there's just these patterns. And sometimes I'm so guilty, and I was definitely convicted about like, I'll like when you, it's like, well, of course you're going to say that, like, you know, and you just kind of, you are already making a conflicting conversation happen that hasn't even actually happened yet, but you're just holding it over their head as like, that's your pattern and that's what you do. And so here we go again. And it's like, oh, that's wrong. And I should not do that. Yeah.
Our words have so much weight that a lot of hurt that has gone back and forth in our relationships, either during quarantine or before quarantine or continuing forward, is in relation to our words. And our words are so powerful. They can be so life-giving, and they can be so destructive. And I think Pastor Mark said in his sermon that the thriving in relationships, it has less to do with covering our mouths as it has to do with taming our tongues. So in other words, it's not necessarily that we need to be talking less. It's that we need to be speaking words of life rather than words of destruction. And so, Val, what do you think are the attitudes and behaviors that need to change in order for us to be the kind of people that are constantly speaking words of life rather than words of destruction?
One of the things Mark said was like, some people brush their teeth first thing in the morning and then they sharpen their tongue. And I took that as like, yeah, like if I'm not in the word first thing in the morning, then you're not going to get good things coming out of my mouth. And I feel like an attitude can start with just where are we getting our thought, like where what are we rooting ourselves in, and what are we abiding in, because that's going to ultimately help what is coming out and what is, you know, happening with our mouths. But I think also an attitude or a behavior that I need personally to practice or be aware of is I have a preference for extroversion, which means I like to process out loud. And so I will say things just like, blah, 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 and then I'm like, ooh, that was probably hurtful, or that, you know, didn't come out how I thought it. I was just processing in my defense. I didn't actually mean all the things that I said. And so for me, I think I need to really think. It sounds simple, but like think before I speak, and try and practice internal processing, especially if it's going to be, you know, a conversation that is with my husband or with, you know, someone, you know, at work or something like that. Just taking the time to think before the words that come out of my mouth can do more damage or hurt someone than I intended it to do.
I kind of have the opposite problem, where I'm an internal processor. And so a lot of times the absence of my words speak louder than when I actually say something. And it really does go back to those kind of intentions of our hearts, and those attitudes that we have that will leak out if we're not tending to our hearts. Because you know, a lot of times, at least for me, I'm just thinking about like, what do I need to get done today? What are my stressors that I have going on today? What are the things that are frustrating me today? And then everything else is an obstacle in the way of me kind of finding whatever kind of sense of center that I'm looking for. And that's when my attitude will go sideways and will lead not necessarily always to hurtful words, but an absence of words, or even positive words that like are just not like tonally, like they're not positive. That I find that if I'm in that frame of mind, then I'm going to be hurtful. I'm not even going to realize that I'm doing it, because I'm just so consumed with whatever I need to get done, or whatever I want to happen.
how you phrase the question, it's like I can only think of one word, like what behaviors need to change, like Jill's selfishness. Like that's it. Like I feel like I can wrap everything in my life would be great if I could just not be so focused on myself. But why is that so hard? I mean, even this time of quarantine, I have thought so much more about how I'm dealing with it than my husband, than my daughters, than my mom, my friends. Like I'm just stuck with myself all the time. And so I'm constantly evaluating, like, how am I feeling? What's going on? Trying to check in with myself and see where my emotions are coming from. I don't do that for those around me. I think, oh, well, my 4-year-old is fine, as I'm shooing her away earlier. If you didn't notice, if you're watching what I was doing, it's like, yes, you can have whatever treat you're asking for. Because I just feel like I'm focused on myself. And even part of what's been so difficult about quarantine for me, and for I think a lot of us, is I rely on things like serving on a Sunday or hosting a small group to make me focus a little bit more on other people. And some of that's gone right now. Like, because I know that if left to my own devices, I'm going to make bad choices. I'm going to stay in bed all day. I'm going to overeat. I'm going to whatever the bad choices will be. But so I've created some habits that are good, that I can fall back on when things are bad. Oh, well, I can go see what work needs to be done at church. Or I can try to do this extra stuff for my students that I'm going to see. That's been gone. So I just, the selfishness is what needs to change. And I need to find more specific ways to serve those in my household. Even as things are lifting, it's not like I'm not ever like I love my house. I love my family. So these are lifelong habits that are really important to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's often said that, ministry begins at home. And I think all of us are like, yeah, absolutely. That's so true. But when we have like the ability to, serve at church every week, or we feel like we're really having good opportunities to make an impact for Jesus at our place of work or whatever it might be, it can really kind of hide some of the failings that we have at home that we let slip because, I'm an important person that's doing important things. And so I think that's something for me that's been convicting, is that ministry begins at home is more than just something that we say to make it look like we're good family people. Like it's this actual like dying to self and work and constant serving that comes more naturally to us when we're kind of outwardly facing and leaving our homes. But when we come back, just maintaining that mindset, because it's just like this different mindset that we have. But like once the door closes at home, it's like, oh, now it's all about me again. And then our families kind of get the brunt of that.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And it's not just ministry. First of all, I'm like, is he reading my diary? Like, I am an important person, and but I think that a lot of even like famous people. But like, does Steven Spielberg's wife ask him to take out the trash? Like, and then that on that level, he would, if that's true, Kate Capshaw, I'm sure, but because she, in those relationships where someone is elevated at work, and you could be any position at work, but then you coming home are just like everybody else, and that is hard. That is not easy to admit. And I think it's important that we realize that that's who you are at your core, like you're saying, and like we're saying, is who you are when the doors close and everybody's gone. Like, it's very difficult.
One thing that I liked, Mark said something about like sometimes in our worst situation, God can actually make it something about the best in us. Like it actually brings out the best in us. And I feel like that is another attitude or behavior that we could potentially miss if we don't hone in on, is like when we forgive someone, yes, it's loving and yes, it's practicing like what God has called us to do, but there's a refinement, I think, there too, that we ultimately will benefit from. And so it's so interesting. Like it seems selfless to forgive someone who doesn't deserve the forgiveness, but God has just this beautiful way to flip things up and around and upside down, and you will benefit from it. Because I feel like when you're holding a grudge against someone, or when you feel like it's almost a burden you're carrying and is weighing you down, and they may not even realize it even hurt you, and they're doing their life and it's just fine. And so by loving them enough to forgive them for something they may not even be aware they did, God's going to use that to bless you, and like it will remove that burden from you. And like it's this weird paradox, I feel like, of like, it seems selfless to do it, but it could be selfish, and because you're going to benefit in the long run. Does that make like sense?
I'm a firm believer in the fact that like holiness and wholeness are far closer related than we often give credit for. Like we know that we're supposed to have these virtues and we're supposed to do these good things, but a huge piece of that is that Jesus just wants us to live life the way that he intended it, and life abundant. And when we are leaning into each other through forgiveness and just the reconciliation, rather than withholding and distancing or attacking, then our lives are just going to be better. Like that's a natural byproduct of living the way that he's called us to live.
Yeah.
We want to thank you for joining this conversation with us. And if you're in a community group, you're going to have an opportunity to dive even deeper into this conversation with your group. And if you're not in a group, now's a great time to join one. You can find out all about our groups at VantagePointChurch.org. You can find a group that fits with your schedule and reach out to that leader and get connected with them. And even if you're not able to join a community group at this time, that's okay. We still want you to be able to dive deeper and to process this and be challenged and to grow in conversation. And so you can go to our group page and you can click on group tools, and you can download a discussion guide there, and you can have that discussion with your spouse, with your kids, with your roommate, with whoever is close to you. And you can just dive deeper into this conversation with them. And so we invite you to use those resources, and we hope that they're helpful to you. But in the meantime, we hope that you have a wonderful week. We hope that you get to go outside and do something fun this week that you haven't done in a while. And we will see you back here next time. Yeah, at least two places.
2 places.
And then we'll see you back here next time.
Bye.
Bye.